Today we're going to have our topic being developing an enabling environment for soil and agronomy data in Rwanda. Right, so for today's webinar, we have some really exciting presenters, speakers, our colleagues in the RwandaSIS project, who I'll just introduce to you briefly. We're going to have we're going to play a video recording from Mr. Christian Witt, who is the program officer for RwandaSIS, responsible for RwandaSIS at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Then we're going to have Charles Bacagu, who is the Deputy Director of the Rwandan Agricultural Board, and he was currently the coordinator for RwandaSIS. He has an extensive background in research on farming systems in Rwanda, particularly with a focus on agroforestry technologies and how they fit well in various biophysical and socioeconomic contexts. Thereafter, we're going to have Mike Rose, who is a CABI associate. Mike has a lot of experience coming from his years at the Department of the Environment in the UK government, as well as at the UK Environment Agency. He's also worked a lot at the Open Data Institute, and his background is in intellectual property. Thereafter, we're going to have Henry, who is a digital development manager here at CABI. His background is in telecommunications engineering. Henry has a lot of experience in ICTs for international development. Kathryn will also be presenting. She is a data analyst and steward at CABI, and her background is in biology and conservation sciences. And now, since joining CABI, she's been working on a suite of enabling data access projects, and most recently worked on a review for the CGR's open access and data management policy. And then lastly, we'll have Lulseged Tamani Desta. And Lulseged is a scientist at the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, CIAT. We're looking forward to what they have to share with us. And to start us off, I'm going to play the recording from Christian Witt.
For soil and agronomy data sharing. Welcome to the webinar on developing an enabling environment for soil and agronomy data sharing, and thank you for the opportunity to send along some greetings. It's 4 o'clock in the morning right now, so forgive me for not being there in person, but I would like to share a few reflections on the importance of the topic of the day. As Rwanda is a strategic partner country for us, specifically in the digital farmer services space, we are really excited about this most recent investment with you on the Rwanda Soil Information Service. It is an important asset that you will be building, I feel, that can inform many other use cases, and these data sets and assets that you are building and, of course, leveraging all the fantastic work that has been done today will inform a variety of use cases as you have mapped out in the proposal. Including monitoring of soils, erosion mapping. There is solutions around soil fertility issues. So, spectrum of cases. I'm sure that within a short time, you will be adding other use cases, leveraging the data that you're putting together. Spatial data, but also building up on this data assets in the years to come, maybe revisiting sites and doing more sampling, so you're adding value with time, and that will all require a very organized way, not just for conducting the analysis or taking the samples, but also curating these data into a database. Now, there's much we have learned in recent years, not only about the technology, as other countries like Ethiopia, Ghana, Tanzania, or India, states in India, in working with this technology. So not just about the technology itself on how to implement the sampling campaigns and doing the spatial mapping and the soil property predictions and introducing spectroscopy, all these fascinating elements of digital soil mapping that allows us to be faster and more cost effective. There's also much we've learned about data use. CABI has been working with us and our partners on the ground in making sure that these data assets that have been built with significant public funding, that these data can be used by all the different stakeholders, including government and policymakers, researchers, private sector partners, or those servicing farmers, to make sure that these data are findable, that they are accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And that required an engagement with these different stakeholder groups, what I call very hard to implement. So what do I do Monday morning is one of the questions that always comes up. And how do you implement? In the case of Ethiopia, for example, after we have done, or CABI colleagues have done, really engaging on the ground with different stakeholders, there were certain issues flagged, like, for example, the wonderful Ethiopian soil information service that has built up the soil data. These data were not accessible, not even easily across own research organizations in the country. And so working with different partners to get into a comfort zone and getting the right implementation policy in place was important. And through this interaction with stakeholders, there was greater realization of the concerns that maybe at the individual level, at the institutional or organizational level, and how these concerns can be addressed. Researchers may be concerned about data wanting to be published first, or there were many different concerns that need to be addressed and wrestled to the ground. And this required quite strong leadership at the national level. So what we found useful is basically coming together as a community of practice, but that requires local champion, a champion in the ministry, in the government, or in a key leading research organization, really to champion this process, to make sure that all voices are heard. And we realize that the full value of these soil information services can really only be explored once the data sharing has been clarified and the implementation policies has been in place. In some cases, I must say, I wish we had done that earlier at the onset of projects. At times, in the beginning, we have invested in soil information services, ignoring this important issue, and then coming back later to retrofit and make it happen is much, much harder. Whereas if you were at the onset of building the Rwandan Soil Information Service, here is a unique opportunity to work together collaboratively to put this data sharing policy and the implementation plan for soil data in place such that all the issues are addressed. And then as you collaboratively build this asset, you can move forward knowing that the data are accessible at the right level. And I'm sure that you will have a very fruitful conversation today. So I'm wishing you all the best and have a good day.
Great. Those were some remarks from Christian Witt. Welcome to everyone who's just joined. I would like to mention that this webinar is being recorded. I hope this is okay with everybody, that we are recording it to be able to share with you afterwards and all those who were not able to make to the live event. So next, I would like to call upon Charles Bacagu to present on behalf of the project. Charles, you can just unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Chipo, for giving me this opportunity. Welcome, everybody. I think the Christian has talked about the Rwanda soil information for Rwanda. Is a project that was approved last year as funding by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And the whole objective is to update the soil information for Rwanda. I just want to recall that we already have a soil database that was developed in the 80s in Rwanda in collaboration with Belgium Corporation, but the current information is part of this information is currently outdated and need to be updated with there's a lot of issues have happened for the last 20 years. So it makes a lot of sense to review to update the data that we have, but also to make sure that the tool or the database that we have can be used for the purpose of supporting ongoing Rwanda development initiative. And I would want to refer here to the crop intensification program that's formed the major part of Rwanda agricultural development process since 2007. So let's go to the next slide, please. So as I said, the rationale behind the Rwanda soil information is that first of all, we want to look at it as one of the tools to support ongoing agricultural development, agriculture sector growth in this Rwanda, because it's regarded as an engine for the economic growth strategy. And as I said, we have crop intensification program, which is a strategic tool that is actually driving this transformation process to achieve the 2020 vision of Rwanda. I hope most of you are aware of this is Vision 2020 and the PSTF4, a strategic plan for agriculture transformation. I hope most of you have gone through it. If not, we can also have a bit of discussion on this. Next. So the crop intensification program, this is a program that was launched or initiated in 2007 as a project meant to increase productivity on Rwandan soil. This is a part of agriculture actually sector transformation that the government wanted to implement, with the view to say that given the context, the specific context of Rwanda, with the shortage of land, but with much more opportunity for diversifying agriculture, with the diversified agroecological zones that we have in Rwanda, there is a way to diversify agriculture production, but also to increase productivity, given that we enjoy, for the large part of this country, the relatively good rains that we get over 2 seasons, which is different from what is happening in several African countries. So Rwanda, as a country which is blessed with favorable weather conditions, there was a clear indication that we could capitalize on this and increase agriculture production, be it crops or for livestock. But of course, the agriculture sector in this country is still dominated by smallholder farming systems, though the CIP program also aims at pushing for consolidation of land, which actually is a strategy to increase productivity on a larger scale. So we are talking about economic of scale. So what actually happened that Rwanda is known to have agriculture organized in small pieces of land owned by farmers. So if you have a picture of Rwanda in your flight coming or approaching Rwanda, you will see from the top, from the sky, that there is a different division of land. Is very much scattered. So for the consolidation of the crop intensification to happen, we actually need to bring together these pieces of land, make it larger, and then do a bit of intensification. When you talk about intensification, you talk about use of good seeds, use of fertilizer, but also mechanization that actually can be done on a larger scale, not on smaller scale. So what happens with the land consolidation in these countries is that the farmers keep the right to their land, but they organize in such a way farmers that are close to each other decide to grow the same crop, harmonize, uniform, make it uniform, the management of the land, planting at the same time, applying fertilizer at the same time, do all agriculture practices at the same time with a view to increase the productivity, but also targeting the market to make sure that we hit the objective of food security, but we make sure that we produce the surplus for the market. So one of the issues that coming back to this project, the issue that we needed to address with the RwaSIS is the issue regarding low soil nutrient, but also fertilizer application, simply because the soil fertility represents a major component of agriculture production. But if you look at the distribution of nutrient concentration across the country, you will see that there is a bit of diversity in terms of content of nutrient, but also the efficiency level depending, changing or varying from one location to another. which means we have a country with diversified type of soil, diversified types of crops with a different nutrient requirements that require developing fertilizer rates that fit with the specific conditions. So here we are talking about yield gap for a different location due to specific soil nutrient depletion or acidity or soil erosion. So Rwanda is a landscape is dominated by slippery slope, which makes erosion control actually is a must for us to increase the productivity. So two major issues: soil fertility, but also soil erosion that need to be properly controlled. So because of this, we still have yield gap that we see on this graph. This is a histogram that you see. So we have here a number of commodities: maize, rice, cassava, Irish potato, wheat, banana, and the banana. So in the blue histogram, this is a national average of what we get at national level. And the red, we have the large scale. This is the large scale farmers. Yeah, there's the yield that we've corrected with recorded in 2018 A season for large scale farmers. And the green one, we have the potential that you can achieve. So we see that in all commodities, actually, we are not yet where we want to be. For instance, for maize, the average for the countries, we're still at 1.5 tons per hectare. This is the average across the region, across the country. But if you move to large scale farmers, this is the farmers who are actually operating on consolidated land, we can get 2.5 tons per hectare, but yet the potential is 7 tons per hectare. But I must clarify here that we have several farmers who have been able to achieve even 7 to 8 tons per hectare using hybrid seed. But we still have many more farmers are still using low performing varieties and the current SIP is to pull these big farmers to make sure that they fill the gaps. Next. So these are gap map showing the situation of soil acidity in this country. So you see that more than 50% actually of Rwandan soil is acidic with a pH of less than 5.5. These are area with red colors, red and yellow colors. So it varies between strong to extreme acidic levels. So you can see the magnitude of the problem that actually contribute to bring down the yield. So in this slide, we are showing the situation of soil erosion near Rwanda, in Rwanda, and we have about 500,000 hectares highly exposed to soil erosion with associated nutrient losses. And so the control of soil erosion is a prerequisite for us to increase. We expect that the fertilizer and the other input that are being used are put to good use. Next. So RwaSIS actually aims at addressing issues of soil acidity, soil fertility, low soil fertility, but also erosion by developing site and crop specific recommendation But the project will build on the foundation or the achievement that the country has already achieved. So among these, we are talking about the investment that were made by the government of Rwanda in terms of controlling the soil erosion. So there are some investments were done in terms of construction of radical terracing that have actually significantly reduced. So the project will actually build on that and try to see the future investment that needed to be made in terms of controlling soil erosion and propose soil erosion management plan. Next. So the objective of the project is to provide information, evidence for improving agricultural productivity, sustainable development, land use. And we are going to build, to operate around the 3 specific objectives. First is to build, to develop site crop specific fertilizer and lime recommendation, to do a comprehensive mapping of different soil forms in Rwanda and propose a management investment plan. And at the end, we aim also to develop a soil information system that will help us to monitor the effect of investment, soil fertility management, but also provide the information and the consistent evidence base for future investment. Next. In terms of implementation, the project is led by RAB with the support of a number of partners, including RwaSIS, ICRAF, ITA, and ISRIC. Of course, CABI as well. It was not mentioned here, but CABI also is part of this. And the 3 main use cases are going to be our major focus. And these were actually identified by RAB through consultation with the key stakeholders, including partners, including development partners, including scientists, including ministries. Next slide, please. So the first use cases is actually connected with the 3 specific objectives. First is to develop fertilizer and lime recommendation to help fertilizer and lime suppliers to develop formulas. So we think that fertilizer and lime rate recommendation is a prerequisite for us to make sure that we avail tool not only for farmers to know exactly what the correct rate are, but also to use it as a tool for planning. Planning because Ministry of Economy and Finance need actually this tool to ensure that a proper budget is planned to make sure that fertilizer and lime are availed to the farmers. So for your information is that fertilizer and lime are actually distributed to farmers here under subsidy model. So government is putting money to support farmers to get fertilizer and lime at affordable costs. So we are regarding this as a tool for planning, but also a tool to help farmers, but also the ministry to increase the productivity that we are talking about. Secondly, the project will also produce information on different type of soil and mapping erosion occurrence in the 3 main agroecological zones of Rwanda. For this specific case, we are going to work closely with the Ministry of Agriculture, but also Ministry of Environment that actually is dealing with the control of soil erosion in this country. As I mentioned before, a lot of investment has been done in the past, and the investment were made to increase, to upscale construction of radical terracing at this country. So the RwaSIS will actually contribute in mapping those areas, but also identifying other areas that need further investment, and make sure that the type of investment that are required are actually well documented and made available. But also we want to look at what this infrastructure what is the correct fertilizer application that would be recommended for this specific area where terraced area, because these are areas that need further investment to ensure soil fertility is restored, but also is increased. Next. The last one is to develop a functional, interactive national soil and landscape information system. So these ones, we wanted to have a sort of a decision support tool to help the ministry, but also other partners, to ensure that we monitor the changes on our soil, but also we be able to update whatever information that is needed. And we think that this tool will help us to adjust soil information systems over time, to make it the process more sustainable, but also to enable the ministry to build the capacity to develop, to monitor what is happening in terms of changes or dynamic in soil fertility issues in this country, and make appropriate decision. Next. So very briefly, we are indicating here what are the users of this information. So we want RwaSIS really to generate tools, or to generate output should be able to serve for a purpose. So we aim at producing documents or tools that would help the stakeholders, but also the policymakers, to make sure appropriate decisions are made. So first of all, we have the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Resources that is going to be the major beneficiary of these projects. We have fertilizer blending companies that are very much interested to match what the farmers need with what what is the soil requirement in terms of fertilizer, and what the crops needs, but also to make sure that what the farmers needs are actually taken care in their operations or in their production plans. So we have lime suppliers also, because lime also will be part of the investigation by the projects. We have the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. As I mentioned before, we get a budget to finance the agriculture sector through the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. So these tools will help us to do a strategic budgeting in this context. Next. So on the side of partnership, as I mentioned, we're going to collaborate with a number of partners, both nationally but also internationally. We have RwaSIS, ICRAF, ISRIC, CABI, and the ITA. nationally, we're going to partner with the University of Rwanda and the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences. Next. So for the sustainability, we plan to have RwaSIS as a project that is going to stay even after the project, the funding, and be integrated into the ministry to make sure that it gets a budget from the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. But as I mentioned, if we make sure that our operation or our model is actually understood by all the stakeholders at the early stage of project implementation, so it's going to be much easier for us to really to have it integrated in the ministry structure. So we want this tool to be part of the future plan of the ministry, but also serve different stakeholders in the agriculture sector. Next. So thank you very much. So I make sure my presentation is brief. Maybe you can get time and discuss more. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Charles. Thank you for that overview and reinforcing again the objectives of the project. Right, so now we'll move on to the next part of the webinar. Okay, I hope you can see. Right, we'll just take 1 minute to also capture some of your feedback. The session we're about to go into is going to talk more about the work we are doing to assess the landscape, the soil and agronomy data landscape in Rwanda. And we've been conducting various activities that my colleagues will talk about, interviews and surveys and so forth. This is just a quick activity to capture from you, the audience who are here today. Tell us what from your experience and work in Rwanda and assessing, you know, the landscape from your own work, what sort of challenges and barriers do you mostly face when you're accessing or sharing soil and agronomy data? This is just a quick activity for you to indicate use a tick box, a check mark against which one you think here is a key challenge for you. Okay, so it could be technical barriers that you face, maybe a skills gap or lack of infrastructure. Is it cultural? Is it an issue of attitudes and behaviors? Or is it around ethical issues and aspects to data sharing? Is it institutional barriers? Maybe there's lack of finance, budgetary support in your organization or the organizations that you see. Or could it be a political matter where, you know, you have, you know, conflicting maybe national policies or conflicting donor policies? Yeah. Okay. I don't know if you can, if you're struggling to find the annotate button, it's right at the top. Drop down, annotate. If anyone still wants to contribute. Okay. Right, so from the looks of it, for those who did, it's about cultural, there are more cultural barriers than the other categories. Okay, this is something we will explore more in depth as we go on, and we will reach out to you and hopefully you can give us feedback in the form of interviews and so forth. Okay, a few more people. Yeah, if you want to log in your answer, I'll give you 10 more seconds. Right, okay, thank you. If you could just turn off that function annotate so that you don't accidentally annotate the rest of the slide, that would be great. Okay, so Mike Rose, are you ready? He'll be our next presenter.
Yeah, I'm here. Let me just Let's see if I can turn my video on. Hello, hopefully you can see me now. You might have seen me popping up a little bit earlier in the middle of Christian's introduction. That's a danger of not pressing the mute button when you're recording somebody for a thing like this. So hi, thank you. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the RwandaSIS, so RwaSIS, and the enabling environment. So trying to focus in on the piece of work that CABI in particular is here to try and do. Cool, next slide. So what I'm going to take you through in the next sort of 10 minutes or so is sort of talk about what an enabling environment is. So I use this term quite regularly, but I think it's important to everybody really gets an idea of what I'm talking about. How that links to the concept of fair data, which if you haven't heard of before, I will talk about very briefly. And then what we're planning on doing in the project, what CABI are doing, and then how you can help. This was never going to be a one-way thing where we just broadcast stuff to you. We're actually interested in how you can help us, and the important, as suggested by Christian right at the start, it's really important that you do help us in developing the right enabling environment for RwaSIS to be successful. If you can click onto the next slide, that'd be great. Just while you did that, I went in and cleared all the ticks off the screen, so from the over-diligent annotating, so that's done now. So just to sort of summarise what Charles took us through, the last bit of Charles's presentation a moment ago, the project that we're involved in has a series of outcomes, and there's the fertiliser recommendations that are needed, there's the lime recommendations, there's erosion mapping, but there will be others that all underpinned by the data that will be contained within RwaSIS, so which will be the soil and landscape information system. It's really important to realise that the link between the data that's being collected and that data then being used to create the information that helps make the decisions. So the importance of the data collection cannot be underestimated. So just wanted to highlight that actually all of the things that we're trying to do are underpinned by the data that's going to be held in RwaSIS. Next slide, please, Jupo. I just wanted to introduce also at this point something which you'll all probably be familiar with, but this is a really simplified data lifecycle. So not only is having the data important, but how you collect it and how it's stored and then how it's used and shared is equally important as just having it. The data moves within RwaSIS like this. So somebody will go out into the field, they will collect data in a particular way, they will then use the database system to store it, and then the database system will then enable them to share it. How it does that's really important, and this is where it links to fair data. So I will digress slightly into fair data for a moment. So fair data came about, I can't remember exactly when, but it was over the last 10 years as a concept. And it was mainly around research data, but I think it applies equally to any data that's collected for any purpose. And that is that data needs to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. There's quite a lot of content that you can find on the internet and in different places around what each of these mean, and the huge loads of guidance about what you need to do underneath each of those. But personally, I like to look at them kind of like at face value. You can kind of understand what each word means just by reading it. So data needs to be findable. So once it's created, somebody else needs to be able to find it. Once it's created and they can find it, it then needs to be accessible. So people need to know that they can access it and how it can be accessed. It needs to be interoperable. So it's, whilst sharing PDF maps is one way of sharing data, that's not really interoperability. The idea is that data will be machine readable, it will be usable by multiple operators in different ways. And then finally, and probably for me, the most important one, because it's the bit where my background comes in, is that data needs to be reusable. So it's great to actually have the data, and it's great to have it stored in the system, but the important bit is making sure that the data, once it's collected, can be reused by everybody. So if you just think about the data lifecycle I mentioned a moment ago, and think about FAIR data, you'll probably see that it's important that you're thinking about all of these elements across that lifecycle to make sure that data can be used and then reused and built upon. Data often is an input. Data that's an output and is shared is then an input to another project or another piece of work, which then goes around the cycle again. And if at any point that cycle breaks, then you can't get the maximum return from having that data available. So you can't then go and do the kind of analysis and gather the insights that you want. So that's the importance of FAIR across that life cycle. Can you have the next slide, Chipo? I'll just go back in and clear all the drawings from whoever it is that's graffitiing me. So just sort of to draw those two things together. So the data, sorry, just to draw those two things together, the database is actually part of the system. So RwaSIS as a thing sort of starts to focus on the storage of data. In order to implement FAIR, we need to look across not just the storage, but how data is collected and created and used and shared with those kind of concepts. But what I wanted to emphasize with this slide is that those actions that people take when they collect and create data and when they use and share data are the key bits. Those actions and the decisions that are made have to be fair in order to make this life cycle work and the data to be shared and used and built upon. The decisions that are made enable the sort of like the generation of the information that Charles was mentioning around, let's say, fertilizer recommendations and the such like. It's important that the right choices are made. I also wanted to just touch on at this point that this is not a new concept to Rwanda, and I know that. We've looked at the data revolution policy, for example, and part of the data revolution policy is about how it gets applied. And what we're trying to do and what we're starting to think about here is how some of the elements of the data revolution policy get applied specifically to RwaSIS. So how can we make sure that works? So next slide, please. So just to really labour this point, and one of my standard pictures of a lot of Lego people, the enabling environment around RwaSIS that we are interested in helping develop and we're helping create is all around people. The people are key to any change. So as Charles outlined, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made, and that data is needed to be used to make those decisions. But getting to that place is a change, and people have to decide to make that change. And in order to do that, it's important that people have rules that they need to follow, and they understand that those rules exist and they understand that they need to follow them. But in order to have those rules, it's really important that there's leadership in setting them up, creating them, owning them, and making sure that people follow them. It's important that there's advocates, so people that understand the benefit of having those rules, following them, and the ultimate outcome of having the rules in place, which is more information, better decisions. And then you need a group of people that are willing to comply with the rules. It's all well and good having a big stick to beat people up with, but if people don't agree with them, don't understand them, don't see the benefit to themselves of what those rules are, then generally what you see is people passively resisting them. So it's not good enough just to have a set of process documentation or laws or policies that people are supposed to follow. You then need to follow that up by helping people understand what the benefit to them is of following these rules, what they'll get out of sharing things. So next slide, please. So just to sort of really emphasize, so what are CABI here to do? So CABI have been asked to be involved in this project to help with this framework and this enabling framework around the people and the processes that are needed to help the people understand what they need to do to implement RwaSIS and get the benefit that has been outlined in the project. So we're here to help develop a framework. We're here to help identify these groups of people. So identify the leadership. Who is the accountable people that will lead us to this new place where data can be shared and used in the right ways? We're here to help identify the processes that might be needed and the sort of training and the education that might be needed around those, and then help draft the sort of starter processes for people to consider. What we're not here to do, and it's worth just emphasizing what we're not here to do, we're not here to do the data analysis work and create maps. We're not here to do those kind of things. We're very much here to help enable RwaSIS to work. But then importantly, next slide, we need you as well. So we cannot come in and start a series, developing a series of process documents and then send them to you and expect that you're going to follow them and understand them. We really need your help to make the RwaSIS yours. We need input on how data sharing principles are created. So we've got some kind of like guidelines that we can follow, and those principles need to be specific to Rwanda. It's no good me saying that I've worked for the UK government. Here's some principles that work for the UK government. They'll work in Rwanda, because they probably won't. The context is different. So we need to bring our experience and expertise from other contexts and share it with you, and then work with you to help develop the right things and products for you. Once we've done that, we're here to help. We need your help to co-develop the processes that we need to make sure that they work. And then we need your help to sort of understand what the ecosystem is that we're working in. Especially with the restrictions on travel and the issues around COVID-19. Obviously, we can't come in country, can't fly out from the UK and come into country. So we need your help in understanding who are the people we need to talk to. So what we would normally do in a workshop, we need people to help us with. And then this is my final slide, you'll probably be pleased to hear. So we'd like you to start helping us straight away, really. We have started to draft some data sharing principles for RwaSIS. The idea is that these are very high level. These are things that people would just agree with, that there's no kind of, shouldn't be anything contentious in here. These are drafted based on a bit of knowledge and experience from working in other contexts, but also building on the data revolution policy and taking specific elements out of that and trying to apply them in this context. What they are, just you can follow this link, which appears on every single slide. So if you don't catch it now, the link's in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide. Follow that link and it will take you to a document which will give you links to other places, one of which will be the data sharing principles for you to comment on. Just to sort of trail what you'll find there, things like data about Rwanda should be held and accessible in Rwanda. Data should be, in RwaSIS, should be fair. The value to the people that are participating should be obvious. And if people are using somebody else's data, then recognition should be given to where the data comes from. It's just a sort of like a highlight of what will be within those principal documents. But yeah, as I said, your help is critical to making these real. If you don't help, then they will just be a set of draft principles forever. Chico, next slide, please. I think that's the end. Yeah, so if you've got any questions about what I've just said there, please feel free to put them into the chat for the overall webinar, and we'll try and answer them either at the end, or we'll definitely follow up and answer them. Or if you want to drop me an email, my email address is there, and I'm more than happy to speak to anybody or have an email exchange with anybody about what I've just talked about. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. That was great. Yeah, so another little activity. This is a question, so it's a broad question, but based off of what Mike has been talking about, you know, the importance of people. People are the ones who make the choices, but they need processes to follow, they need leadership and so forth. So what do you think? What needs to be in place to make data sharing easier? Can you just go back again to that annotate feature and type in, use the text option to type in what you think, or just give you 1 minute, reflect, and just type in what you think needs to be in place in terms of people, in terms of processes. It could be people, it could be a certain role. There needs to be these types of roles in place. There needs to be, if you know someone specifically you want to put there. No. So actually, I think there's a text option. So you don't need to choose between the two, but actually you type something. I hope that makes sense. So clear named leadership role from within RAB. Great. Processes, a centralized database with clear data access process. Keep them coming, folks. Community of practice, definitely. I think we will hear more from Lulseged when he presents the importance of having a community around this. Right? Simple technology. Okay. Okay. 30 more seconds. Going. Incentives. Nice. Yeah. I think we've got a lot of cross-learning to do amongst the projects that we are working on. So we've got a bit of research work we've done for another project around incentives. So we will be bringing components of that in. Okay. Right, so moving right along so we don't, if you have, if you still have burning things you would like to discuss with us, definitely we'll give you the opportunity to sign up for an interview, and then we can carry on the discussion directly with you. So moving on, I'm going to bring in Henry, who's going to present, Henry and Kathryn.
Yeah, thanks, Chipo. So basically for this presentation, I'll briefly talk about the Rwanda landscape and let in my colleague Kathryn to take you through what we have done under the landscape analysis. So the aim of conducting a landscape analysis is to get an overview and an understanding of how data flows in Rwanda, and also what agricultural and soil data already exist, because that is really key to understand the different kinds of data which exist, who have access to it, and how they gain access to it. And I think the presenters have mentioned that to develop a data storage and sharing system, in this case, RwandaSIS, it requires the input of different stakeholders. It also requires the input of potential users of the system. And for example, the users could be soil scientists, policymakers, researchers, data scientists, etc. And in order to make RwandaSIS work for all stakeholders, we require input from stakeholders. And I would say throughout this project, you are VVIP, very, very important people who will contribute to this project. So what we have done so far is to understand and identify the key stakeholders in soil and agronomy landscape. And I would like my colleague Kathryn to just take you through, present the findings from the research, and I'll chip in to show you the ecosystem map, what we have done under the ecosystem map, where we have mapped all the stakeholders, and lastly, provide channels for feedback, where you can give us feedback through either surveys, through interviews, etc. Kathryn, please. Yeah.
Sorry, we can't hear you, Kathryn. I think you might be muted. Or...
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Hi. So yeah, just a quick word about the ecosystem map. So this is a way for us to kind of visualize how data flows and what some of the kind of relationships are, what exists in Rwanda currently. With consultation with you, we'll develop some kind of understanding about what the barriers to this kind of data flow are currently, and that enables us to provide that support with the processes, the people that is fit for context. Next slide, please, Chipo. So to do this currently, we've been interviewing people, so we've only had 4 so far, but really keen to do some more. And we've done a literature review looking at kind of papers, strategy documents, reports from in country. So next slide, please. So yeah, this is just a very high level presentation of the results. There is a lot going on in Rwanda. It's clearly the place to be. There's a lot of kind of government departments, NGOs, funders. There's a lot of kind of repositories and databases present. They seem to be quite siloed from the outside, I should say. So it's kind of unclear what those data relationships are. There does seem to be political will, so that kind of data revolution policy to kind of integrate these and enable data to flow kind of more readily. Agriculture is the biggest sector, so it's maybe not surprising that it's so diverse. And as Charles has said, that there have been some soil mapping activities that have been conducted. Soil data collection is happening, but these efforts aren't necessarily aligned and data maybe isn't shared. Next slide, please. So yeah, just that kind of broader national context. So Charles mentioned in his introduction the Vision 2020 and the Smart Rwanda Master Plan. So there seems to be kind of a centralized push to kind of transform the Rwandan economy to one that is kind of digital, tech-led. And this led to this data revolution policy that we've brought up a couple of times. From that as well, there seems to be, oh, sorry, Chipo. So there seems to be a national data portal being developed. Whether RwandaSIS, the expectation is that will feed into that or otherwise is less clear. The National Institute for Statistics and RwaSIS seem to be the primary departments involved in that work. What was kind of exciting about this is when Charles was talking about agriculture being the engine for this kind of transformation, that RwandaSIS is a really good opportunity to do that. And if we are intentional about aligning with this vision, it could be a real strong use case to elsewhere in government, elsewhere in Rwanda. This is how you implement this kind of national vision. So it's quite exciting to see that kind of context there. Next slide, please. So it seems the image isn't there, but I will click through to the ecosystem map in a minute and show you. But there are a lot of databases, it seems, within the agriculture sector. So things like AMIS, ALICE, SNS call center, all of these different kind of Minagri managed databases are all contain data. There's a lot of NGOs in the country collecting data, but again, how is this integrated? What are the barriers that exist, and how can we prevent them from affecting RwandaSIS? There does seem to be a plan for a kind of centralized data warehouse, so that would be the SAIS, the Smart Agriculture Information Service, and that seems to want to kind of integrate these different databases, and whether RwaSIS will feed into that. Again, good to hear thoughts. Next slide, please. So soil data itself, so Charles has mentioned a couple of efforts in his introduction. So I think maybe the CPR, the carte pédologique, was what he was discussing, that soil mapping activity in the kind of late 80s. Again, who has access to that is maybe not clear. If I am a researcher at the University of Rwanda, how do I get access to the CPR should I need it? If I'm a fertilizer company, can I get access to the information contained in there? There seemed to be a caravan project, which was last year, which looked at kind of capacity development and kind of building mobile soil data collection. But again, who has access to that data, who needs it, is maybe less clear. I think what I'll do now is share my screen and show you the ecosystem map. So.
Just to comment something under the databases, the different databases which exist. I think it's really key to have integrations where, as we develop systems, even we are developing the RwandaSIS, we need to make sure that these systems can communicate, where we are able to integrate, use APIs so they can communicate. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. If we're able to make these systems communicate, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Being really intentional about what already exists and how can we design RwaSIS so that it's kind of feeding into this existing system. So the ecosystem map should be on your screen now. I'm aware it's a lot to take in, so we'll share the link with you after. I'll just give a quick introduction for how to navigate that. So you can see all of the different stakeholders here. The arrows signify a relationship. It would be really good to hear from you what those relationships are. How does the data flow? If it does. If it doesn't, why not? You can click on an element and you can see at the side here there are 3 dots. If you open that, there will be some information in there about that specific element. Some of them are not complete because I couldn't find enough kind of research about them, but if you could provide further clarity on those, that would be valuable too. What else do you need to know? You can kind of focus in on a specific group. So if we take RAB, on the right-hand side, there is a focus button, and we can just kind of look at the relationships that RAB has. So if you are a member of RAB and you want to focus in on there and you have more ideas about more linkages that could happen, that's kind of how you do that. So that's kind of, if you could share the slides again, Chipo. That's kind of the picture that we've developed so far through the literature. Aware it's not complete. I'm sure people who actually work in Rwanda have got a lot of thoughts about that. We'll provide you some kind of channels for feedback on it. So we would like to do a workshop with you where we develop that, and we will invite you all to that. The interviews that we're conducting are a good opportunity for you to kind of give some more clarity on that picture. And we'll provide a link for you to register for those. A questionnaire, we'll send that around. And again, that will be gathering more information about that. And a report, so a kind of 2-pager, which we will publish online, and you can comment and suggest edits to that. So that's me, thanks.
Thank you, Kathryn. So great, thanks a lot for taking us through the data landscape as it looks at the moment. And we really, like Kathryn says, look forward to engaging with you to validate it, to add more, find what the gaps are, and really give a good reflection, an accurate reflection of the landscape. So now I'll call upon Dr. Lulseged to make his presentation. He's going to talk about similar initiative in Ethiopia and the experience that they've had. So if you can please unmute yourself, I will share your presentation now.
Okay, thanks Chipo. Hi everyone. This is Lulseged from Ethiopia. I work with the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT. Thanks for inviting me to present our experience related to data sharing and data access in Ethiopia the last few years. I think there is a lot of similarity in between Rwanda and Ethiopia, and also all the presentations I listened, some of them have already passed through those steps. So I think it will be very interesting exercise to share our experiences. We have started the exercise around 5 years ago, aimed to discuss on developing site and context-specific tools to target fertilizer application to address the huge yield gap in the country This is an example of Witt, just done a few years ago. And there is a huge yield gap in the country, and there is a need to fill that gap. And the clear determinants are climatic and mostly rainfall and fertilizer, low use of fertilizer, and also unbalanced use, in most cases blanket recommendation. And therefore we say there is a need to develop something, and during our discussions with different partners and experts, we realized that we don't have the necessary data. Next slide, please. So we know that data is important, but we cannot find the data at the relevant or at the appropriate place with appropriate resolution. Next slide. So what we needed to do was to look for options of getting data so that we can make better decisions based on knowledge and experiences from analytical skills. We know that there are more than 60 years of work on crop response to fertilizer application, and recent work by the Agricultural Transformation Agency, which led ECOSIS, has done a lot of work, very tremendous work on soil mapping and also some demonstrations, but still accessibility was a challenge for better use of those data sets. Next slide. So CIAT were supported by GIZ, started exploring on how we can start and promote data sharing and access. So initially, it was a very serious challenge. It was not really possible to bring on many supporters in that area. So data access was like, a very controversial issue in the country. So we started bilateral discussions and some institutional discussions. And then when we know that there are some interested groups, we invited for a short workshop for a group of people to discuss on the way forward around 2015 in October. And that discussion really created awareness among members. And we, in principle, agreed that there should be a way to initiate this data access and sharing in the country by bringing data sets together in a centralized system and doing the right analysis. So the first step we said was, because it was not possible to get accurate and adequate data sets, we said, let's collect what is available through publications. There are a lot of publications in scientific literature, and we said, why don't we bring those data sets and do some kind of analysis as a demonstration for those other institutions and partners that having a larger data set can mean better and a lot. So that really was an eye-opener, and we made some presentations in 2016 on a meta-analysis where we have very good presentations, and even local partners were invited to present their reviews, and we published their work in a special issue in National Journal as an incentive for their effort. Next slide. Then with that review dataset, we created a quick database. So this was the initial one. So our effort is to demonstrate what is possible. So we create awareness among other colleagues so that they can also be ready to share and support what we are trying to do. And that exercise, we hosted the database for different crops based on those reviewed data sets. And the EIAR is Ethiopian Institute of Agricultural Research, so they lead the research exercise. Next slide. Then the next one is, okay, we have some data sets now that's available, and also we are negotiating with different colleagues to get data, but we have to show why do we need that data and why do we need larger data sets. So we organized a national workshop on big data analysis and data sharing. So we invited experts from abroad, from within Ethiopia, and we presented different experiences on big data analysis and data access benefits and so on. So that was also a very inspiring discussion for senior agronomists and soil scientists in the country to see what can be possible. And then during that discussion, there was a group who showed greater interest, and we wanted to maintain our activity, and we suggested to create a coalition of the willing, because among the close to 90 people, there were some significant amount who are interested. Few were still debating on data sharing. So we said we have to create a coalition of the willing, and these are individuals and institutions who are willing to support, to provide their data through a formal data sharing platform, and also to support what we are trying to do. So that was a very great initiative, and we asked people to sign up, and a lot of around 45 people signed up. So that time we have formed the Coalition of the Willing in 2018, which achieved a lot of work, which I will present some of them. Next slide. And so now, after a year, the task force was given, the coalition identified some key intervention areas. Number one is to create awareness among different colleagues, institutions, and offices on data sharing, and also to make sure that we use the data sets appropriately and intelligently to support government planning and decisions. Then there was a discussion to form a task force, because we have around 40, 50 people as members of coalition. So for proper management, we need few people who can also lead the task force as a team. So the coalition. So the task force, around 7 people. There was a criteria who should be the member of the task force, and then we identified from research, from international, from universities, 7 people. So the task force were asked to give some mission. Some of them are like they have to facilitate and coordinate activities of the coalition, collect further data, and develop guidelines on data sharing, because we still don't have data, even though we received some data from colleagues. As you see on the right side, the red and the other colors, the red color is by members of the coalition who joined lately, and the first one, the others are those collected during the review. And also we agreed that we have to contribute to the national data sharing policy. So with these developments, coalition members provided more data, and we also provided training for members of the coalition who provide the data. So this was also another incentive. We invited experts, and around 22 people were trained. First of all, in data preparation, data exploration, and the second one in further more advanced data analytics. And their work or publications are going to be published in a special issue, around 4 or 5 papers. So that was a good step where we created a task force and we started to build capacity. And the next slide, then through this coalition exercise, the government was aware on what we tried to do. And some of us were identified, selected to be task force for the national system. So they named it a task force as well. So the state minister appointed around 5 to 6 people to lead data sharing policy development for the Ministry of Agriculture. So that was very, very important, because we have somehow influenced this exercise. And then the next activity was we during our trainings and different exercises, we identified that there are still a lot of data sets in different places, but still we don't know, who really has what kind of data. So we call it data ecosystem mapping, and we tried to identify which institution or which individual has which kind of data, and we developed a template, and we assigned someone to collect, to go and review who has what data in what formats, are they georeferenced, what are the units used, and so on and so forth. And the huge data, a huge set was identified, a long set of Excel sheets with so many partners having different types of data sets. And there are some questions asked whether they can share the data sets or not. More than 40% said they will agree to share the data if we ask them to, if we provide or request them officially. So that was an interesting intervention that we did. And then the next slide, the next exercise we did is during our training exercise and our analysis, we observed that data have different formats. So there are some units used, the locations, the way they are prepared. It was very difficult to make analysis, or at least it takes a long time to prepare the data set. So we said, why not we devise or develop a guideline on data standardization, data collection. So even the participants said this is more than 50 years since they wanted to have this standard data collection and analysis in the lab. Then we identified experts, senior experts, who can contribute in developing a guideline, a standard data analysis collection and analysis guideline. So we identified around 6 major thematic areas: soil agronomy and soil fertility, one component; agricultural water management, another; integrated watershed management; soil plant water analysis; soil biology; soil survey; and a cross-cutting. Cross-cutting is any data that is going to be collected from the field should have some universal attributes in terms of location and some descriptions. So these 6 guidelines were prepared. We prepared around 10 days right shop for senior experts, 3 to 5 group for each of the guidelines. So that these are now ready and they have been reviewed locally and also reviewed internationally, thanks to the support from Mike and his team from CABI. 2 of them are now submitted for publication because we observed they are more clean and ready. The others were still working on them to make sure that they are useful, because there was a confusion between a guideline and a manual. So some of them are too detailed and not really beyond the guideline, so we needed to revise. So this is one very interesting exercise, very much appreciated by the ministry and senior colleagues. And then the second one is, the next slide, please. The other one is that the coalition was like CIAT leads the coalition members, and we have a task force, but we didn't have a place. We needed a host. So EIAR, sorry, that is not T, EIAR, volunteered to provide, to be a host. So that means officially, yeah, the Coalition of the Willing is hosted by the Research Institute. And any development we are doing now is linked with EIR. So we have a web portal which is being developed to facilitate the data sharing, visualization. Ministry of Agriculture is the key, because any decision or recommendation we make should pass through the ministry and extension service. So they are part of the exercise. And also we continue engaging and collecting more data. And now the COW members are more than 80, and also we have brought some other experts, data analysts, geospatial experts, and we are contributing not only on soils and agronomic related issues, but also on other emerging issues. And we have been working, for example, on COVID-19 and how, hotspot mapping, where should we target as a priority in COVID, in countries where the economy doesn't support to do those protections. Next slide, please. Then we have several partners working with this. So CABI was instrumental in from the data ecosystem mapping across different interventions. They support the data sharing guideline development. I don't know if I mentioned that. The first step after the coalition was to develop a guideline that can enable us share data among the coalition members. Then the data sharing policy development, when the government asked us to develop that, we connected with CABI to support the policy development component. They provided trainings and several awareness creations on fair data, what is fair, how should we make it fair, and so on. And also they have supported reviewing the various documents we have, including the guidelines and other documents. And we're also now preparing some leaflets and other materials. And we have planned now, COVID prevented this exercise of capacity building in different forms. Now we're trying to see on web-based capacity development and trainings in beginning of September. So in addition to CABI, in addition to GIZ and Gates Foundation, CABI is also providing technical and even sometimes financial support in organizing training sessions. So that's instrumental for us. Next slide. So ultimately, I don't know if you see all of the slides. We are not collecting data for the sake of collecting and sharing. So we have some objectives, and the final target is to develop a knowledge-based fertilizer recommendation that is site and context specific. So we have achieved the majority of those, and we are now fine-tuning the different components. Because we need to make, we have larger data sets, of course, thousands of data sets, but to make those recommendations at farm level will not be straightforward. So we have to do more and more work, and also contextualize those to different household typologies, and embed or include agro-advisory services, which we have already developed with in Institute of Agriculture Research. So this is advanced, and we are now lucky that the Excellence in Agronomy, being coordinated by IITA, has selected Ethiopia to be one of the use cases. This exercise, what we are doing with in collaboration with Digital Green, so we'll be able to do some more along that line. And also still we are collecting the data, and that I hope will be available. We have some remaining data sets that are going to be collected, and we are also collecting data on the ground for fine-tuning the models or the prediction tools that we are going to develop. I think these are briefly some of the experiences we have along the Coalition of the Willing in Ethiopia, and we have so many presentations and slides. And if you need details, we can provide that. And Mike also knows some of the activities we have done. So thanks a lot for the offer, and good luck.
Thank you, Dr. Lulseged. It was very inspirational. Okay, thank you so much, colleagues, for hanging on. I know we are 6 minutes over the time. I just want to share with you some few links so that you can access more. You can access all the material that we've been talking about. So specifically the summary of the research, desktop research we've done, and a link to the Kumu data ecosystem map for you to also give your comment and feedback. These documents will be opened next week for comment. Ooh. There we go. Yeah, that link. But I really wonder why people are not putting any questions. Do you have, unless I'm not seeing them? But please use this link. This is the link Mike was talking about. This will show you the summary of the Rwanda Desk Research Report, the document with the draft data sharing principles. And then after this webinar, we're going to follow up with you, if you don't mind. In that folder, you will see a link to sign up if you want to have more conversations around this. Okay, so we can really flesh out this landscape phase of the project. And then we will be calling on you for more webinars like this, more hands-on webinars where we would like to do a workshop style and really try and validate the data ecosystem.